Hey guys, welcome to my review of the new Nothing But Thieves album, Broken Machine. So Nothing But Thieves are a British alternative rock band who have kind of had a lot of success, especially over here over the last few years. I kind of consider them to be among the big wave of British rock bands to come up and get a lot of success in the UK over the last few years, along with bands like, of course, Royal Blood, Catfish and the Bottlemen, and other bands like Wolf Alice. Their debut self-titled album, in my opinion, was one of the best albums of its year, although at the time I hadn't actually heard it. I didn't come onto it until about a year or so afterwards. But I definitely think their original album is kind of problematic. I think it's a really great, fun alternative rock record, but the problem I have with it is that I think it kind of feels like a collection of singles more than sort of a cohesive album. And don't get me wrong, the singles on the album are fantastic, but I feel like as an overall album it doesn't really work too well, and on repeated listens it can kind of get a little bit tiresome. But luckily it seems that with their sophomore album Broken Machine, they've actually learnt from their first album and gone into it with the intention to make what is basically a full album instead of just a bunch of singles put together. And I think it definitely works because of that, and off the bat I think this is a fantastic album and I think they did a great job with every single song on it. My first introduction to the record was the first single they released from it, Amsterdam, which this is a very huge epic track which I just absolutely love. It has a massive chorus which I completely see people screaming back at the band. It's kind of one that can fill huge venues and festivals and stuff like that, and I think so far it already has been doing that, and they've been performing it all year at festivals like Reading and stuff that they've been playing at. It's a song about Connor Mason, the vocalist, wanting to be different and not be like everyone else in the world, but when it actually comes to following through with this idea, kind of struggling to be able to do it. And not only that, he kind of sings about how people nowadays are less connected and how instead of kind of staying friends with people, they all move apart and they don't really focus on each other because they're busy looking through a screen throughout their entire life. I think lyrically this is one of the best tracks on the album, and I think it definitely has really great instrumentals and melodies to boot as well. And the following single, Sorry, I didn't actually listen to until the album had come out, and I really like this song. It's definitely very different to the rest of the album. Unlike the very gritty alternative rock sound that most of the album has, this one is much more of a pop song. Although I think a lot of people will probably look at this song and think like the chorus is a little bit cheesy and corny, I definitely think it really works well. I do admit that the chorus is a bit unoriginal and uninspired, but I still really dig it. I think this track is one of the most emotional and beautiful tracks on the album, and that's what keeps me coming back to it time and time again ever since the album's release. And the chorus is incredibly catchy, and honestly I've not been able to get it out of my head ever since it came out. The song is kind of about Connor singing about a previous relationship and apologising for the things he did to her and how he let his insecurities get the best of him and kind of ruin what they had. And he starts to question himself. There's even the line, maybe I'm defective or maybe I'm dumb, in which he basically says, am I really stupid, or is this like an actual problem I have that I can't let people get close to me? And I think lyrically it's a very solid, beautiful track. I adore this song. I think it's honestly one of the best on the album. And then there's the single I'm Not Made By Design, which is kind of like Amsterdam, but it kind of improves on the formula in my opinion. It follows the same basic song structure, has that same huge epic chorus, but I think this song works just a little bit better. This is one of the many tracks on the album that touches on themes of religion, and in it he basically says he's not going to be like every other person and not get incredibly violent about his religion. He's going to be very open to other people's opinions and stuff like that. And I definitely think, although the lyrics on this track aren't the best, they're definitely some of the weakest on the album, I definitely think it's a great idea. There are definitely some lyrics in this track that I think are a little bit cringy, like the opening line, I live on oxygen, a bastard monkey boy. That line has always thrown me off. Like every single time I listen to it, that line, it's such a terrible lyric. But that chorus where he's screaming, "I'm not made by design, can you be satisfied?" That chorus, oh my god, it just pumps me up every time I listen to it. It's just so massive and epic, and it just sounds really great. And this very grandiose, huge sound of this track is something that follows through on pretty much every single song on the album, something that the first album also did, but I think this album does it a lot better. The album never really gets boring throughout its tracks. There's never like really slow moment, and even like the slower, more somber moments are still very huge and epic. And the opening track, "I Was Just a Kid," is a prime example of this. This track's a very obviously Queens of the Stone Age inspired song. Like, seriously, this is like exactly what Villain should have been. And this is another track about religion. Connor's basically singing about how when he was in a really low place in his life, he looked at religion to kind of guide him and help him out, and how he realized that religion really wasn't the answer, and that he felt like he was being used by it. And he sings about how he's lost his faith and how overwhelming it was, realizing that the thing he put so much faith in have massive cracks in it and don't really make that much sense. But I do think the chorus on this kind of sums up the problem I have with a lot of the choruses on this album. Even tracks like "I'm Not Made by Design" are prime examples of this chorus, where it's basically just two lines that repeat throughout the entire thing, and especially later on in the song it can get a little bit repetitive. Luckily it doesn't quite get as bad later on. This is probably one of the worst offenders of it, where it gets really repetitive. After the first quarter of the album starts to go in a weird experimental direction with the two tracks Broken Machine and Live Like Animals. Broken Machine starts off this very electronic sort of sound. It almost reminds me a little bit of the song Connection by Elastica, although definitely not quite as pounding and aggressive. That little vocal stab right at the beginning that repeats definitely reminds me heavily of that song. This song kind of pulls together all the themes from the album, his struggles with faith and mental health, and kind of he's basically calling for someone to come to him and help put him back together, basically. And lyrically, although the instrumentation isn't very emotional, when you break down the lyrics, it's pretty dark and depressing. This song really does seem like a cry for help from Connor, so yeah, it's a pretty emotional song. But I think the instrumentation on this track is really, really interesting and different. It's one of the few moments on the album where they just completely just reinvent their sound and do something we've never heard on any Nothing But Thieves song before. And this follows onto the song Live Like Animals, which is this very fast, funky track. It also brings in some of the electronic sounds of the previous track and expands on it even more. Everything in this song is incredibly loud and fast, and I think it sounds really great. Connor in this song is kind of singing in a very political and social way. The song is kind of about how people follow what they're shown on TV or in the news and stuff, and how very few people have their own strong opinions on things and basically are just following what everyone else does, and how the youth today are starting to open their eyes and make a difference and try to change that, but also how the older generation are starting to get scared about that and trying to suppress us. I think this is a very weird and interesting track, one that when I first heard it I wasn't sure about. I was like, what is this? But one that over time, over repeated listens, I've definitely fallen in love with this track, and I really, really love this track. I'd probably say my favourite track on the album is the song Particles, which honestly every time I hear it, it gives me goosebumps. I can't explain it, but this song is one of the most euphoric and hard-hitting tracks on this album, and it's at the same time one of the slower moments as well. But that chorus, my word, that chorus, it gets me every time I hear it. Connor's vocals on this chorus are just perfect, absolutely flawless. He just cements himself as being, honestly in my opinion, one of the best singers in UK rock at the moment. In this song he sings about how he suffers from insomnia and sleep deprivation, and how on the band's last tour he kind of became addicted to sleep medication. And also he starts to question himself and question whether this is something that's alright or whether it needs to be changed, with the first lyric in the chorus being, "Baby, tell me if I'm being strange and if I need to rearrange my particles." Lyrically, this song is just absolutely stunning. The instrumentation is beautiful. The vocals on this track just completely knock it out of the park. I honestly think the vocals on this track are not only the best on this album, but the best that Connor's done in any of the band's tracks, which is definitely saying something because he has an incredible voice. After Particles, I do think the album kind of starts to lose a bit of steam, with the next two tracks, Get Better and Hell Yeah. These songs are by no means bad, they're actually pretty good, but I definitely think compared to the rest of the album, these tracks kind of lack something, and I'm not really sure what it is. I just think maybe it's that they're not quite as original as some of the other tracks, I'm not sure. But the album then pulls it all back around with the last track on the album, Afterlife, which is just an absolutely beautiful song. This is definitely one of the more slow and emotional tracks on the album, but it definitely does a great job of ending things. This track is kind of one that seems like it could be one of two things. It could be another religion song and about how he's kind of lost his faith completely and how he's kind of struggling to get over that, or it could be about a lost lover who he both misses and's kind of glad that they're no longer together. He kind of says that he doesn't like living without her, but at the same time he feels like going back to her would be the biggest mistake he could make because he'll just feel himself being consumed again. And yeah, this is just a fantastic album closer. I just love this track. Although the deluxe edition does add 2 extra songs onto the end, I honestly think that those tracks are kind of unneeded. Although I think both deluxe edition tracks are pretty good, the album would have been perfect just finishing at that point, and that's the main reason why pretty much every listen I've done of this album's been on my standard edition vinyl I have back there. And something I'll quickly say about the vinyl, it just looks beautiful. It's a signed copy as well, but it's a marbled black and white vinyl. It looks incredible. I fully think it's one of the most beautiful looking vinyls I own in my record collection. I honestly think that this album kind of proves to a lot of bands that second album slump doesn't have to be a thing. Of course, many bands have made some of the best second albums ever, bands like Weezer, Nirvana, but also at the same time a lot of bands kind of can fall into that slump, and it's definitely something we've been seeing a lot over the last couple years. And I'm really glad that I could go into this album and not be disappointed like I have been with some other bands that have released their second album after a great debut this year. I'm looking at you, Royal Blood. This album is a very vibrant, aggressive and emotional experience, one that hits me every single time I hear it. It's just incredibly well written, well played. The vocals on this album are just absolutely stunning. There's not really a bad track on this album. Even at its worst, this album is still really damn solid. I honestly cannot recommend this album enough. If you haven't checked out their first album, I definitely recommend giving that a listen first, but definitely check this album out. Even if you don't like the first one, definitely check it out because it's a very different beast altogether, and it's a very aggressive, abrasive, in-your-face album that I honestly just absolutely adore and can see this being very high up on my favourite albums of the year list. So I'm gonna give the new Nothing But Thieves album a 9.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching my review of the new Nothing But Thieves album. Let me know in the comments section below if you've heard this album and if you thought it was as good as I think it is, or if you absolutely hated it. I've actually seen people kind of be on both sides of the spectrum. I've got loads of new videos coming out over the next month. I'm kind of tempted of doing a Death From Above review, but I'm not 100% sure yet, and I definitely do want to go back to Queens of the Stone Age's Villains because I never actually ended up doing a review of their album, and I've got a lot to say about it. Of course, I'll also be doing a Concrete and Gold Foo Fighters review in the next week or so as soon as that comes out, and I've got a big announcement coming soon about some new videos that will be coming out next month. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.